some cool intro music for this new segment.
We'll get
Hi,
there.
those of you who will maybe watch this someday. I am Matthew. I've decided to do a Dungeon Master get together podcast thing where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons and DM type things.
Huzzah.
It worked. That's what it sounds like when somebody
This is
hosts me.
beautiful. I
And
just
now we
hosted
can
you,
just use
so
that for our intro music every time.
Dark Souls.
To my right, we have Jake in the middle. Tell us a little bit about Jake. Jake?
My name is Jake. I've been a dungeon master off and on since 2006. I cut my teeth on Wizards of the Coast Star Wars Saga Edition. Uh,
Mm.
but my breadth of experience has encompassed Pathfinder, 5th Edition, Starfinder, um, Mutants and Masterminds, and a bunch of other different, like, kind of alternative genre RPGs.
Jake is our resident expert, you could say. That
Yeah.
probably should have said some of my background on the whole D&D thing. Actually started playing with Jake. He was my first DM and current DM. We've had a few different ins and outs of different settings and campaigns. It's been glorious. Don't know how long ago that's been. Since I was a player, I guess 2011 maybe, so 7 years. Started my own 5e campaign this year, so fresh DM.
Nice.
And the other one is Mr. Guy. His name is Guy.
Why, hello there. Hello there. There we go. It's my typical. I am probably the most recent DM out of the three guys here. I have only played 5e, and of that, have only been a player like 3 times. So I've DM'd since last August, I think, was when we went hardcore, but I've done world building and that kind of stuff for years. I have a file from middle school that is full of that kind of stuff. So D&D was really a place where I came in and had a world that I wanted to present. And when a buddy of mine came up and said, "Hey, do you want to DM?" And for Dungeons and Dragons, I said, "Heck yeah!" And so then I attempted to homebrew a complete player's handbook, cried, and just picked up 5e and started to slowly meld together the worlds of 5e and doing my own homebrew and learning how to DM. And so have been running a consistent campaign since about last August. We took a short hiatus over Christmas, but other than that, I've been doing D&D at least once every 2 to 3 weeks since then. Run one shots for people all the time, and am getting to share my world with you guys. So I'm probably the newest and most noobish here. But that's what I do.
All right. Well, first topic I wanted to discuss with these gentlemen is, what do you think it means to be a DM? Start with Jake.
C'est bon.
That's a pretty broad question. But I think
How do you
Cover
do
all
life?
the bases in one question. There you go.
but I think it can be broken down into a number of factors. There's obviously DM as narrator, the person that drives the story forward. DM as referee, the guy who helps resolve the rules. And then there's, I really like the way Erwin McManus put it, DM as cultural architect.
You have people you can quote. I'm already immensely impressed. Carry on.
But and he's not a DM in any capacity, but like setting the atmosphere in which you and your players play. I'm sure there are factors that I'm not thinking of, but those are three big ones.
We'll get into some nitty-gritty details later. What's your overarching opinion, Mr. Ravenhood?
Well, I think for me, I really, really resonate with that idea that a DM is supposed to be a narrator. I like to joke with people who they're like, "Well, what is your pastime?" I tell them I'm a collaborative storyteller. So I daylight as a call center worker, and then I'm actually a collaborative storyteller. And I think that's the biggest thing that a DM can be. So it's someone who can act as a mediator between players and a set and a system that gives structure to storytelling. But the ultimate end is to create stories and I think build community, whether that's with just your D&D group or the tabletop roleplay community as a whole. There's a really cool little video that I just threw up on my Twitter, I think yesterday, that's by Animated Spellbook. It's a series by a guy named Z something. And he made a really cool little short about how the community of tabletop roleplay and once again, all my experience is D&D 5e, but as a whole creates the opportunity for shared experience. And so as a DM, you want to facilitate a positive shared experience. And if that means fudging a rule or a dice roll, this is my philosophy, of course, to make the story better, then and give the players an enjoyable time, that I think is the greatest goal of a dungeon master, game master.
Nothing terribly disagreeable on my part.
What are your thoughts?
What do I think it means to be a DM? I'm gonna break it down like this. When I first decide, hey, there's this campaign I want to try, I get like an idea for a world, and then I expound on that world, and then I'm like, hey players, okay, this is what to expect. This is kind of the political climate or whatever, if I'm going that route, or if I've got like actually currently there's like a no magic rule at the moment with exceptions and opportunity to expand. I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about the world. It's an old world that one part of the world was like starting to decay, and so the rest of the world decided, let's quarantine that world. And then like 1,000 years later, we've got the players born in that world and trying to discover what the heck this world is, and eventually find a way to reconnect with the rest of the entire planet, and then they'll connect to magic, and it will be overwhelming and glorious.
Yes.
So I guess my particular opinion of what it means to be a DM is you tell a story with a bunch of people, you set the scene so much, and then the players or the actors, the story follows them, and you kind of do everything else, like what's happening in the background, all the scenes, what's all the things that they don't know about, how that's gonna one day impact them maybe. Yeah, that's my opinion. So what do you do when you want to start a new campaign, or what did you do for your current campaign? Start with Guy on this one.
Oh, well, this one's actually pretty cool. One of my community members in Sherwood Forest, which is like my channel and stuff, actually reached out to me. We worked together at Starbucks, and I did like I said, I did world building before I did D&D anyway. It was just a hobby of mine. And it turns out that I got so into it, and because I always bring other people in. Like I said, my whole thing with D&D and dungeon mastering and all of that shenanigans is focused on like community. And so I've always been someone to bring other people in and be like, hey, so I'm creating this race of frog people. How do you think they would use XYZ? And so he came up to me one day and actually said, well, you do all this stuff and you've got this world. We've talked about D&D, you've never played. If I committed to playing with you, would you want to be a dungeon master? And so it's kind of funny. I actually got into the position I'm in from one of my friends who wanted to play, which is really cool. And then we pulled in one other person, and then my wife wanted to play. And so then we had a party of 3, and then we had a 4th friend who was like, oh, I want to play too. And then suddenly we went from 4 to a party of 6. And then one more came along for one of our early sessions. And I was just like, 7-person party? Sure. Why don't you just join in? It shouldn't be that hard.
Something like that, yeah.
But basically, it just was the result of having already a friendship where I talked about world building and whatnot. Then he reached out to me, and then I finally, because I'm never going to write a book. I say that. I hopefully will. But I was not in a position where I wanted to write a book with these worlds that I made, but I was more than able to put D&D into my world once I understood the game. So that's how that started. And then I kind of became the resident, because I kind of binge watch crap. So I'm like, oh, I'm getting into this. I should probably binge watch everything about how to be a good GM and what D&D is.
Yep.
And so I ended up going so far into it, I kind of have become the resident D&D expert at my wife's high school for all her students, my church, and my workplace. So it went from I want to play D&D to suddenly being like at the center of the eye of this storm. So that's how I got started. And then that first little group of people is who I've consistently held a weekly or a bi-weekly game with.
I've always been under the impression that after you've played so long, you could just if you have good enough note taking, you could just take everything that happens and put that in a book, and then people would love it.
Right? I'm actually I'm doing something similar, but with a podcast style presentation, like old time radio. So I'm in the process of doing that kind of writing.
Reading the story, kind of recapping your, they used to have those weekly adventure things, Adventures in Odyssey or something like that used to be of the same persuasion. All of my camera settings are broken now. Guy. But I guess it's your turn, Jake. What did you do?
I'm a Doomkoff. Please forgive me.
Broke all my camera settings, Guy.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's fine.
But so yeah, I'm about to do a recap in old time radio drama style thing. So if you've ever listened to some of those old radio shows like The Shadow or The Whistler, or Bob Hope, something like that.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
Our Heroes, etc.
So was the question how to start DMing, or how?
The question was, what do you do / what did you do when you decided, hey, there's this campaign I want to try, and how did you pick where to start and pitch it to the players, etc.?
This most recent campaign's all online through Skype and other online solutions, so it was a bit of a unique situation. I put out the feelers to a few select people I knew I wanted involved, people I'd played with before, people I thought would really thrive in a cooperative storytelling setting. And then I just put kind of a general feeler out on Facebook, and the rest of my players came after that. For me, world building, it's been enticing, but it's always been subordinate to character drama. So rather than building my own world, I'm just using Paizo Publishing's Pathfinder setting of Golarion.
Nice.
And using that as a sandbox in which I can tell some of my own stories.
I'm looking up Golarion.
I guess that is a good segue into the next question. What do you feel from using an established world that's already rich and full, and you can just kind of plug and play like Galarian, or
Mm-hmm.
jump in and just start making your own world, which is a lot of work, but you can kind of play in an unfinished sandbox as you go and just build and keep going. Which is currently the situation I'm in. It's like, okay, not a whole lot of depth here, but it's mine.
Hmm. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that question.
Yeah, I think that one has to do a lot with like what is your philosophy in D&D? Or I mean, I should just say RPGs, tabletop RPGs. So let me ask this then, Jake. What? Hold on, I'm going to see if I can phrase this right. With your, so you and I think are the kind of the two examples of that. Like I have world building, and that got me into tabletop role play. You had the opposite, and then have kind of just grabbed and plugged. Why do you prefer that? And then I can share the contrary, and then Matt, whatever your thoughts are and where you fall on that scale.
This time I used it, honestly, partially because building a world's a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wanted to plug and play quickly.
Okay.
I didn't and also I really like Galarian. I think it's a really good, in a lot of ways, just the way the continents are arranged and the cultures are distributed, kind of fantasy Earth.
Okay.
And I really wanted to tell stories specifically in that space. But I think a lot of being a DM is knowing it, and this only really comes from experience, when it's okay to kind of like take a shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Being a
and
DM is a lot of work, as we can be at least.
and that was one such efficient option.
Yeah, see, I do a little bit of the opposite. I've put so much into world building that I tend to. So you invest more of your time in the actual storytelling. I do, and when I say storytelling, my brain isn't in the place of like gameplay. It's like, what is it? Are you running a module, or did you write your own type module? Is what I'm talking about when I say that. And I tried to do world building and writing my own module. That failed miserably. So I jumped on the other end of it, where you're investing more time in like the storytelling and preparation there. I'm investing more in the world building, and then I edit the story from what it sounds like. So
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
and so I'm using a lot of modules right now for my main campaign, because I just don't have the time to write continual stories for like continue to update the story based on where they are, and like I don't have that much fleshed out, so I'm running a homebrewed Princes of the Apocalypse right now,
Right.
for D&D 5e, and then kind of twisting those features in that to the world that I've made, because I focus on world building and then storytelling within that, whereas it
That's
sounds like you focus on storytelling and aren't as concerned with the world building.
right. That's an absolutely valid way to play. When I actually
Mhm.
began the campaign and playing with Matt and company,
Mm-hmm.
I was actually running an entirely separate second home campaign
Good
as
gravy.
well. So I actually, the first 6 levels of that were all a module as well. I was running Paizo's The Dragon's Demand.
Okay. Nice. What is the premise behind that?
Uh, a a wizard was going to sell a book to a green dragon, but then the wizard dies,
Hmm.
and the book ends up in the hands of the PCs. And the dragon holds the village for ransom unless they deliver this artifact of power.
Nice. Nice. How much do you so I guess Matt, what are your thoughts on all of this?
It's most of these, most if not all of these questions are there's no right answer. It's like, hey, let's feel
Exactly.
it out. So, um, I don't know. I have enjoyed doing everything my own way, but you kind of like after you go on for like a month or two or whatever, you start you feeling shallow kind of. It's like, okay, what else do I do here?
Yeah.
I
Right.
think Jake's actually a player in one of those games, so he can say his opinion about that. But I think I've managed to get somewhat of a good balance, even though it's sometimes kind of shallow. I have like an overarching plot where we're trying to get somewhere. I know what the grand story is, and how to get there is kind of
Yeah.
depends on what the players do from week to week. So I try not to
Yeah.
script too much, but the rest of it is just like struggle for survival, getting from place to place. It's
Yes.
just travel is hard, but that's where most of your encounters are going to come from.
Your setting is very much I'd say on the fantasy darkometer, somewhere
I like dark.
between somewhere between Dragon Age and Dark Souls.
Okay. That's nifty.
So like it's very rough, very gritty world. And I'm actually really invested in my my guy trying to figure out where all the magic went and why no one's ever been outside of the borders of this region.
Because he plays a warlock, so that was one of the
Okay.
caveats for how magic exists. Because demons still kind of influence this world, but everything else is like divine or nature or something like that. It's hard to come by because it was like kind of a what you would call it, side effect of sealing off this area. Call it Sendar with a T, and
Zendar?
Tsendar. It's like they were trying to stop the corruption from spreading that was starting to sink in, and they could see like, okay, maybe a millennia or two down the road the whole world could be corrupted by this, and it was just not a good time. So they're like, okay, let's lock this area. Kind of a side effect is it cut off the connection to magic and cut off the connection to the divine. So not a lot of moral people inside this little bubble.
That's really wow, that's a really cool concept. I like that.
I kind of built everything around that.
Nifty. Well, I mean, every world has like a central premise. I don't even know if that's the case because now I'm trying to think of like what central event is in the current setting of mine. Anyway, but that's really cool actually. I'm just and then Sender that's reminding me of Terry Brooks' Shannara series, the first one of that, where the Gypsy morph, about the Gypsy morph, and it's kind of it's the moment where our world becomes the world of Shannara, and it's all centered around this one entity called the Gypsy morph, and he essentially does the same thing. They create this like, I don't know, bubble of safety, not quite millennia long, but the world ends in a nuclear holocaust outside of the bubble, and then everyone within the bubble is magically inclined. So something similar,
Kind
which
of
is
the opposite
kinda cool.
way, though. But yeah,
right.
like
But the
everything
same idea
outside
of
the
like
bubble's bad.
this
Everything,
piece
yeah.
of the world is preserved for the future.
I'm really into like post Earth, like fantasy stories like that, or like Numenera from Monty Cook.
Oh yeah, I've seen a few things. I'm thinking Dark Crystal for some reason. Not quite post Earth though. The old '80s movie or whatever.
Yeah.
You
Super
guys in your culture. So
But
that's an apt
go
bunny
watch
tale.
Dark Crystal. It's all Muppets.
Oh, no.
If you haven't seen it, Matt, it's done by. It's got the Jim Henson feel for of like characters and whatnot, and it would be hilarious. It's kind of like I think Dark Sun, that iteration of D&D had inspiration from this post-apocalypse like Dark Crystal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, it's a great movie in and of itself, but if you can stand that era of filmmaking, which I love,
I'm actually super into that.
I
it's
will
just got this
consider
great.
giving it a chance, but probably not because I'm lazy.
No, it's
Anyway,
not. Sorry,
I am
and we're
also a
back.
player in Jake's game, so
There you go.
I told about my little setting. Why don't you spill what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so I've spun off the Dragon's Demand into homebrew content. I'm my my players are trying to stop the cult of the Great Old One Nyarlathotep from activating magic devices in cities across the globe, from that drive anyone within a radius mad. It's essentially, like the Scarecrow fear bombs from the Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Ooh.
but like with Old One juice. Cthulhu Potato.
Old One juice. I love that.
Figuratively speaking. But there's also a subplot. There's also this like celestial subplot going on with our rogue, where
I love subplots.
she's like a star touched sorcerer now, and a subplot going on with our barbarian, Matt's character actually
I'm a
hunting.
barbarian.
I would like to rage.
I don't actually
The
rage.
Queen of Demons for killing his god in like primordial times.
I am a moon-cursed barbarian, so I turn into a wolf.
Okay. Pathfinder difference?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Pathfinder. His world's Pathfinder, my world's 5e.
Okay. Yeah, and
One of
I
my
remember
favorite
that.
characters ever actually is the one I'm currently playing in Jake's game.
So, Moon Curse, is it basically forgive my ignorance, basically a werewolf?
Basically, except
Okay.
without the gnashing
With
desire to
cognitive.
kill and eat people.
So, like a...
Cognitive
Okay.
difference. Probably a little not as strong as like your standard werewolf, but obviously
Okay.
PCs eventually outrank these CR locked creatures.
Of
That's
course.
what platforms are for.
Unless you
give
modify the creature.
werewolf armor and make it older or something, etc. Scary.
Nice.
Maybe one day we'll fight an actual werewolf. That'd be cool.
Werewolf. Werewolves of London?
Woo!
Thank you. The Werewolves of London.
Like, can I
Nice.
get sued for this?
Maybe.
No, neither you or I are on key, so it's totally fine.
Got him.
Uh,
I don't know where we're going. Kind of bunny trailed off a bunny trail.
well, I mean,
We talked about our worlds a little bit.
Yeah.
As an offshoot of what it means to be a DM. We were talking about established settings versus homebrew settings.
Gotcha. Thank you. Very good.
and I have melded those two together because fully homebrewing something is absurd.
Accurate.
That I don't have the time to do yet. But I hope to someday for running a campaign in either the very distant past of my world or the very distant future. That will involve a full-blown homebrew. So,
Exciting. Everyone cannot wait.
which would be super fun. Because then you get to be anthropomorphic races where there are no humans.
I always enjoy playing in a homebrew more than a pre-gen, but that's just me.
Why is that?
I don't know. I just when I'm playing a pre-gen, it feels kind of locked. Like you have to go this way, you have to do this, you have to do that, because there's no content outside of the pre-gen. You can't explore and take side quests and stuff like that. And there's probably some really good pre-gens out there that do accommodate for that, but I've not played in many. So
No, are we talking about a pre-generated setting or a pre-generated like adventure?
Usually like the adventure, like the whole thing, I guess.
Okay.
Like the world itself, that's whatever. You don't have to make your own world for it to feel open and free.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I was talking about is like you buy a book and you read out of that, and then that's the story,
Right.
which we
What
started
I've
with,
done,
which was fine, and then we moved
um,
on, and it's better.
yeah, and what I was doing when I did that was taking that, modifying, and then dangling independently generated side hooks off of that.
And honestly, I think that's what ends up happening as you grow as a DM. Because I found when I first started, I feel like I've done everything backwards. I didn't reach out to start D&D. Someone reached out to me to start. I didn't start with a module and then go like I didn't do Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is the starter kit that you can get. I was like, I'm gonna write my whole own adventure because I've never done this before. And then I went, holy crap, I'm dying. And then like I had to shoehorn the plot line that I had written into Horde of the Dragon Queen, which we found out is not a great module at all for D&D 5e for a new DM. And then I had to shoehorn that into Princess of the Apocalypse. But I feel like because what I have found, even in the midst of all of that chaos, is even though I'm going by the book, when you are, because one main, maybe this is something we can talk about in a minute, but one of the top 5, I think, skills that is good for a DM to have is improv. And the idea that, yes, I have the book and yes, I have this module in front of me, but I've got this, I see where there could be a side quest and I can use this feature and this feature and make a side quest. And so you end up, I feel like any DM will eventually start homebrewing without intending to.
Yes.
And I feel like it's a positive thing for you to do that because then your players get an experience that is unique to your group. And then it's not like, well, and so once again, it's building this unique community for you and your crew. So like you two, you have your own campaign. And even though anyone can go to an adventurers guild, like the D&D, and I'm sure there's a Pathfinder equivalent to game stores across the states.
Yeah.
Like, even though those exist and they're deadlocked into, well, you have to use these and this, that, and the other, you get this kind of your own flavor of whatever tabletop you're playing when you're playing with a group of friends and you have a DM that is willing to improvise and write the story to the character. And so I feel like every DM will eventually tend towards even if you would call it mild homebrew, because then you're going to get instances where, well, technically the book doesn't have anyone that would be linked to their backstory XYZ or this, that, or the other, but you make that happen for the case of storytelling. So I feel like improving leads to homebrew, which I think is a good thing to do, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then like maybe it's not the main quest. Sure, the big bad guy still is whoever it is, Cult of the Howling Hatred or the Elemental Eye or your old ones or whatnot from your Pathfinder deal. Like, I don't know. I kind of trailed off there. My brain shut down. But does that make sense?
Should require some homebrewing. You have to fudge with rules. You have to fudge with everything that you touch, basically, to make it the way you want to play. And you don't keep that as a secret from your players. Obviously, you're changing these rules and that rule and that, and it's like, okay, you're just making things up on the fly. But if you like sit down, it's like, hey, let's have a talk. This is what I expect. This is what you can expect. Blah blah blah. That usually goes over a lot better. I guess a good way to summarize it is if you are a brand new DM looking to get into it, pick up an adventure thing and change whatever you want, add subquests to it, make it a foundation that you can just jimmy around with and have fun with.
question.
Since my question.
I'm actually going to be, whenever we're done with this, I want to, all right, because we're turning this into a piece of audio that people can get a hold of later on. I actually have a group of friends out on, I think it's your part of the world, East Coast, and they are just wanting to start up. They were supposed to start yesterday, but they're doing to that. So my last stream that I did was the last couple hours of it, we're sitting down with these folks and saying, hey, and they were players, but they were asking questions like, how do you deal with players that might XYZ, this, that, and the other. But I really would, their DM has never DM'd before. They're running 5e, which I think is a good place to start for a new DM, because it's
got easy building blocks.
Yeah, and I feel like now Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, while they are good to start with, they might be really rules heavy. Do you guys think there is a system that is ideal for new players, or do you feel like they just need to pick one and start? What are you guys' thoughts on that? Because they're starting 5e, and have already begun that process. But for someone who wants to get into tabletop roleplay, what are your thoughts on a DM starting that?
There are a lot of options. 5e is honestly a really good choice. It is a system that in a lot of ways gets out of its own way. Like the rules get out of their own way and let the story be king. But it all depends on the style of DMing you want to do. If you're looking for something a little more rules light and a little more like an improv game, Fate Core.
Yes.
Or Fate Accelerated is a solid choice. And that's a system that requires a lot of more of like give and take between the players and the DM, where you kind of set your expectations for the setting together. So there's some merit to that. Or Fiasco.
Okay.
Is another great rules light, very improv-esque situation that doesn't require the rolling of a ton of dice. So that's kind of
the
a
best
trend
part.
like that. But the idea about Fiasco is that it's basically a do-it-yourself Coen Brothers movie. And at the beginning of the game, you and your fellow players use dice and the setting to create a web of needs, items, and relationships between the characters at the table. And then everyone goes around the table and takes turns playing a scene. Now, when is the beginning of your scene?
I think I saw that on Tabletop.
Yeah.
Tabletop? Did they play that?
Yes.
Okay.
So when it's the beginning of your scene, you decide whether you want to set up the scene, like who's in it and what's happening, or let someone else do that and decide whether or not the scene ends well or poorly for you. And then, depending on how many scenes ended well or poorly, that'll determine where your character ends up in the aftermath. So each game of Fiasco is all self-contained. So those are two really good rules light RPGs for people just getting into the hobby. If you're into more like the damage and hit points and things, 5th edition is a really good thing, a really good place to start out in. For that.
It's really forgiving, because sometimes I feel, and I really like Fate Core. I didn't know about it before we started, but there's so much leniency there. But I can also see for people who have never done any kind of tabletop RPG, there's a lot of pressure on the imagination and creativity to make a scene.
Yeah.
So where the rules I feel are lighter, it's a little more dependent on the creative and imaginative capabilities of those playing, which is fine. And some groups can do that. But I also know on the flip side of it, if you are less worried, you need more structure to your story and whatnot. I think that's why we picked 5e, and also we were all ignorant to all things tabletop. So you're just like, Dungeons and Dragons is the only thing out there, and then we got into it and we're like, holy crap, there are billions of different versions. So
it's a lot of content out there.
Yeah.
Which, ironically, 5e doesn't have. So I'm kind of going to play devil's advocate for a bit, because 5e is a great system. I love it. It is simple. You can just jump in and play. Hardest thing is just making your characters and getting it set. But then once you've done that, you kind of just roll with it for a while, and there's not a whole lot to keep track of, and you get used to your same 5 numbers or whatever over and over.
Right.
The learning curve is really simple.
But there isn't a whole lot of choice when it comes to different like race types or character classes and stuff like that.
Official stuff, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, in comparison to what?
In comparison to Pathfinder, which is my probably favorite.
Okay.
It's just there's a lot of content. Some of it's third party, but it all kind of rolls in together. Like if you wanted to play a Minotaur who was a shaman, or a Minotaur who was a necromancer, you can mix and match so many different things. But I think more specifically, each class has like probably 20 different archetypes you could choose from to kind of custom fit what kind of ranger you want to play, what kind of barbarian you want to play, etc.
And they're all like official stuff? Well, I guess that's just because it's been around for forever.
Anything I see in Hero Lab I consider official, because that's like the easiest way for me to keep track of stats and all that sort of thing. The closest thing 5e has to that is once you get to like 3rd level, you get to pick your specialization in that class, but there's like 5 sometimes different options you can pick, and it's not quite the same level of detail.
They're
However,
slowly
Pathfinder
expanding that, but I
has
definitely feel you.
A million different numbers you have to keep track of, which is why you need some kind of organization method. I feel like paper and pen is not easy enough to keep track of everything.
I think that's a great segue.
I've done it in a Word document for like 10 years.
Yeah. Some people like Excel. Some people like this new D&D Beyond thing. But
I like that, except that I've already bought all the books and I'm not buying them again.
Exactly.
Although
I love Hero Lab. That's what I would give my vote to. It's
Hero Lab?
Yeah.
So I think that's actually a great segue, because I think organization is one of the things I struggle with the most. Like keeping track of everything, what happened to the players, their individual storylines, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've got like 5 to 10, 15, I don't know how many different notes I've got just in a folder, and then I've got a few folders like for cities. Here's a note on the cities and NPCs and etc. And I've got my main document I just call present and plans. Like this is where we are, and this is where I'm trying to get to for the next few sessions, and then the rest of it's just like overarching story, like campaign notes, like about the world.
Okay.
But there is a lot. As far as DM note taking, that can be a little cluttered. Because I've also got a journal. Like I'm not by my computer, and I write in that, and I don't take the time to put everything in this journal onto the computer. So I just like, when I get to a certain point, I'll like put my notes in on like the computer or in the journal. It's like, okay, consult this note, and then I'll say consult this note. So that kind of helps tie notes together. I'll tell myself where to look later.
That's good. Because I've got a binder that I was like, everything's beautiful and organized. I've got it all here, and then like I hardly open it. And then I have like a journal that I jot down notes on, or this, that, and the other, or this, that, and the other. And I feel bad, like because there have been a couple things that I have dropped as a DM, and I feel bad for the players because they'll like, I wrote a letter to Leosin. Have I gotten the letter back yet? And I'm like, oh crap, I forgot that you did. What'd you write in the letter again? And like takes away from that experience. So, Jake, how do you organize stuff being the veteran here?
Well, I've definitely been there, and even recently. And here's the thing, like, I'm still learning too.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, like, I don't have anything like a fancy super system or anything. I just keep notes on my phone. Like it's kind of I've kind of got a threefold thing going on. Like, what the PCs are doing.
I'm actually taking notes on this because I'm looking on how to improve.
What the PCs are doing. What's kind of coming up next, and then what's going on in the background, like what the villains are doing. Recently I teased a villain to my players, and I've got a kind of like a tracker going in one of my notes about, okay, so now it's Thursday, day 6 since Farfara had that dream. What's he or she doing to further his or her sinister plots today?
Okay. And you do this all in a Word doc or where?
Yeah, it's all in notes on my phone.
Okay.
I don't have a computer anymore. So I've been kind of roughing it. But so far it's been working out adequately.
Nice. My nostril itches. Pardon my. Okay.
I kind of let some notes fall to the side if I don't think it's super important. Like, I'm not going to write down everything that the players did. Like, okay, they fought this thing. It's like, okay, I don't know. We've the encounter, give them the experience and the reward. Let's move on. I can't keep track of everything. So if I do miss something that the players find important, I feel like it's up to them to make sure that they're taking notes too. And then they can bring it back up to me and like, oh, okay, we can work with that. Yeah. And then I'll kind of just make something up on the spot if I have to.
I definitely don't write down everything the players do, but I do try to keep track of like their goals, because I think that's super important. And then just kind of like what the next breadcrumb for those goals are.
And so like the goals for the bad guys or the players?
For the players. I mean, and for the bad guys too, but that's a separate deal. Because I think like definitely part of being a DM is managing your players' expectations, but also like trying to anticipate them as well.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's good to every now and then have a session with the players just to like kind of recap. It's like, okay, things have been going this way, and I don't know, how do you feel it is? Are you guys having fun? Is there something I can do better, etc. Every now and then, like a couple months, or if you feel like your players are just bored all the time, you might want to have one sooner.
We just had that chat a couple of weeks ago, and I think that went reasonably well.
And if it takes all session, it takes all session. And if it doesn't, then yeah, you go play.
You play and do your thing. That's good. So organization and like, are these separate notes in your phone? Like, are you using, when you say that, like, I'm imagining color note, and you have one note that says the PCs are XYZ.
Honestly, for me, it's a little more intuitive than like systematic.
Okay.
I just do what works for me until it doesn't work, and then I fix it.
Sounds like what I do. I understand that.
A lot of this hobby is experimentation.
And I think that's a lot of what being a DM is
Yeah.
like we've said several times throughout all of this, like a lot of being a DM is feeling out what works for you and then finding how to meld what is out there in the world with what you do. So like that's a huge part of what being a DM is. I think when I first started, like, because I started when my buddy Cameron was like, "So you want a DM for us?" I went, "Oh crap!" And I think I binge watched all the How to Be a Good GM videos by Matt Mercer, Matthew Colville, How to Be a Good GM, the guy from I think it's South Africa. There's another guy out there that I watched a ton, Don Forge Cat. Like every Google searched how do I DM thing I took in, and I think the one theme that I heard across the board was if you see something and you like it, steal it.
Yes.
Take every liberty you can imagine
Absolutely
and just run with it.
Because and it sounds like we're all figuring
There are
out
no
how we
rules.
want to do this.
There are rules, but there's no rules.
And I think you experiment not just for yourself, but you experiment to find out like not just what's a good DMing trick in general, but what works with your particular group of players.
Yeah, that's important too.
Like my player Lauren,
I've got to play a Lauren.
my
I used to have
my
a
girlfriend
friend
actually
line. It's the same thing.
loves character drama. So for her, I've got to make sure to I've got to find stuff pertaining to her backstory and things like that, because that keeps her motivated. Like, oh, the Evil Thieves Guild assisting the old ones is has hired your assassin's mentor. Oh no. And then my player Ashley just loves is really into crazy shenanigans. So just giving her a lot of opportunity to get into mischief, or throw the first punch at a bar, or
There you
something
go.
like that. So a lot of it's experimenting for you and then experimenting for your players.
Yes, that's hilarious. My Lauren player is also very much into the character building and whatnot. She will write me short novella backstories, even for one-shot characters. Like the one-shot that I was telling you about before we went live. She says, "Well, I've been working on this character for about 2 months now. Can I play her?" And I was like, "You know me, I don't care." But she perpetually has at least 6 characters in
chamber,
creation or going, and she just
Yeah.
likes writing the story. So
Yeah. And a lot of it's learning what makes your players tick.
right. How do you find that out, especially as a maybe a new DM?
Just by playing with them. You just got to play with them. You can ask a little bit hey, are you looking for more rousing battle or political intrigue? But a lot of times I think your players, and I heard Matt Colville say this, and I agree. A lot of times your players won't even know what they're looking for until they find it, or until they're not getting it, and then they'll speak up. So you just gotta play with them.
Yep.
One of the benefits of playing with one group of people for a really long time is that you get to learn those quirks intuitively, those motivations.
I think I need to ask. I want to ask everyone that what do they? Because here's something else that I struggle with as a DM, and Like I have the philosophy behind it, but sometimes applying it is hard. Like I want to keep the story moving forward, which is really important. And but sometimes I get so caught up in trying to like the story bogs down because they're like we go around the corner and we check for traps. We move forward and we check for traps. Like I don't know, like controlling that kind of movement. I don't know. Like I don't even know what that question was because I'm trying to keep it on the what does
No,
it mean
I know
to
what
be a
you're
good
trying to
DM.
say. It's like
Like time
you're just trying
management
to
or
get the party from point A to point B so you can start doing stuff, and then they're worried about the journey from point A to point B being difficult. So
Sure.
they're like just. I
Well,
think that's almost always
do
a
you
problem. They search for traps. That's what they're gonna do if you
well,
keep trapping.
here I figured it out. I figured out how do you because what I have found out has happened a couple times, and I just realized it about because we only get to play bi-weekly, and especially for groups who don't get to get together that much. As a
sure.
DM, you want the story to progress, and for me, I feel like, and I don't know if this is good about it otherwise, or even if it bothers them, or not. What I want the narrative to advance. And so I feel like as a DM, my role is to make sure that the narrative is moving forward constantly. And for about 2 of our get-togethers, which was a month, mind you, we literally went through what time-wise in game was about 6 hours. Like we barely moved forward through anything and only got through like 2 rooms of the whatever the scenes we were in. So like as a DM, how do you guys manage letting them do what they want and just kind of letting the players hang around and then advancing the narrative for the sake of the players there? I don't know. Does that question make sense?
No, yeah, I follow.
I think what I would do, if it's like just a lot of searching for traps, is you could just have them search once for traps, and it's like, okay, you've meticulously gone through the floor and found everywhere that's not, it's not traps. Or you could be like, okay, I'm just going to tell you there's no traps, whatever, just so we can keep moving on. And then
what if it's the player actions?
I guess that depends on what specifically they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, first of all, it begs the question, like, are the players having fun while they're pouring over this dungeon floor with a fine-toothed comb?
A 10-foot pole?
Sure, yeah. If the answer is yes,
on a 10-foot pole.
If the answer is yes, if they're really enjoying this investigative portion of the adventure, then for like by and large your job is done. Like if your job is to facilitate the fun, and everyone's having it, it doesn't need. I don't think it needs necessarily to be an issue. But that being said, if 1 or 2 players are getting bored, just kind of dovetailing off of Matt's thing, remember that you control the flow of information.
Valid.
As the DM, the flow of what the players know comes from you. Like for example, one thing I'll do is if my players want to have like backstory conversations or like character development conversations or even just kind of goof around with each other, I sometimes have them do that while they're on the way between point A and point B, like while they're walking through the city street or like down the road to the next town, or I ask like once everyone's ready to go, be like, you find yourselves on the road, the gates of the city like receding into distance. as you walk toward your next objective. So in situations where things have become kind of a slog and fun's not being had, you control how that information gets disseminated.
As a dungeon master, and in our efforts to be a good DM, how do you do that? How do you control that flow of information? Or the reason I laughed earlier is there's a song by, I think it's Flogging Molly's or someone like that, and it's, we're on the long road, we're only the one road, we're on the road to God knows where. And so that was just running through my head for a brief moment.
You mean the adventurer's traveling theme?
Yeah.
Yeah, the murder hobo anthem.
There you go.
Doesn't
So
matter.
how do you control that dissemination of information? How do you what does it mean for a DM to control that?
Deciding how much effort it takes for a player to find out a piece of information, or like the flow of time. There's this one anecdote that Matt Colville told, and check out the video because he tells it better than I do, but in which one of his players wanted to kill an NPC and another one wanted to interrogate an NPC, and he said what he wished he'd done is told the player that wanted to save the NPC, hey, you see NPC Slayer PC reaching for the hilt of his sword.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of how you can control what people know when, in order to keep the game fun and moving forward.
That's good.
I feel like that specific scenario comes up a lot where X number of party members want to kill NPC or enemy or whatever, and then the other few want to be like, no, let's talk to it and let it go or whatever.
The old Colosseum vote.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, even not even just that, but just making decisions, if that makes sense. So I have a group of 7.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have a hard time.
For the love of God. And I didn't know. If I had known beforehand, I would have limited it to maybe like my first original group of 4 or 5 or whatever it was, and then anybody else. Because like what I've done is my group has a peanut gallery, is what I lovingly call them, and they're a group of friends. Like there are on average like 9 or 10 of us will come over on a D&D night, but only 6 or 7 of them are actually in game. And the other guys are just hanging out and doing whatever and partaking of food, and just it's the whole idea that we talked about at the beginning is, as the DM, you kind of act as this host for a community of people that just want to grow as friends. Yeah. And my peanut gallery, this is what I would have done differently. I would have said, okay guys, well, there's the original crew of what I think was 5. And then I would have probably rotated in one more person periodically. And just been like, you want to play? Great. In the next 2 weeks, you might not get to play this specific character you wanted to play, but kind of like what Critical Role has done with guest stars.
Yeah.
Something similar. And when we're done with this, when we finish this story arc in this epic, it's gotten to the point where I have so many people that I actually want to move towards that, because as a DM, I love introducing new players to tabletop roleplay. And so it's like, we all have those decisions we wish we had done. And that was one of mine. And I don't remember why I went on that tangent. But there's that.
Decision making. So here's a thought. And this is maybe going to be a little bit controversial, but
excellent.
This requires a lot of trust between players.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of larger groups, it might be like expedient to have the party nominate a leader. like or rotate a leader. Because like
Interesting.
executive an executive keeps people. I mean, as long as that leader is going to listen to the other party members, you know, and not be like a tyrant. But
That's the key.
and that's why I'm saying like it requires a special group and a lot of like trust between party members. But I mean, and say what you will about an executive, he or she keeps a large group from being like bogged down into committees.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing I've ever tried, but I think it might be interesting to experiment with if you've got the right people.
That is it interesting because what's happened in my in my group is I have two very vocal individuals, and recently we had a third character come into the party because when we finished the first kind of we've now played a basic storyline as a crew. We were going into the next storyline. Like it's all one arc that I've put together, but we kind of beat the first boss, for lack of a better term. I told my players, I said, hey, this is our first time playing D&D. If you want to keep your character, great. If you want to make a new one and we fit them into this next like arc, all for it, do it. And we did that. And one of the new characters from that is a complete flip from what this player's other character was. So their other character was really like little, it was all like nice and cuddly and everyone loved her. And it was like, we all love your little character. Yay. To this new character who's really like the exact opposite. Very standoffish, like, look, shut up, this is our decision. And so now I have three people, one person who's doing it as their character, and I don't think it's bad because I trust the individual running the character to like, there are times where the character itself is creating a lot of tension, and not in a bad way, I don't think, but there's a lot of like, oh crap, like, if we don't make a decision, this character will step forward. Because what'll happen is my other two vocal people will be like, well, we need to go here. And one of them's like, well, what's the decision we should make this way? And the other one's like, punch in doors, which has led to some fascinating moments. But they'll suddenly get into, and the one who's like punch in doors is super tactical. And he's like, well, next time I feel like our cleric should X, Y, Z, or perhaps we should da, da, da. And he's not a jerk about it, but he's just, that's how he plays. And then we have the other one who's much more like, but do we need to go over here? Or should we? And so they'll get into this discussion. And then my other three are just kind of like, and then one of them's just super, like, I have so many personalities. They're great. But they'll get into these discussions. And then this new character will just be like, I walk up to the hag and I ask her a question. And everyone's like, huh? What? That's actually what happened in our most recent get together. Was there was a moment where they walked around a corner and one person was like, I send my water elemental up to the door and I knock, and the door gets like blown open. The water elemental gets hit by something and this hag walks out and goes, what are you doing here? And there's a moment where Battle Bro, as I'll call him, puts his hand on his sword and he like walks up and he's ready to fight. But they're all like, everyone's like, we really don't want this fight. We really don't want this fight because they were low on spell slots and everything. And so there was this really tense moment where they were doing all this dialogue between themselves as people. And then this other character just walks up and goes, I'll trade you the guy with the sword if you let us go. And just like shut up all other, well, we should do this with the hag and we should do this with the hag. As a DM, how much, I don't know. I'm trying to tie this back into what does it mean to be a DM, but like now I've got this trifecta of like decision makers, and if these two don't make the decision,
making an ultimatum, while the rest of the party, I guess it depends on if they feel cheated or not, or if they're like okay with it, because they're getting nowhere and they need a catalyst.
Yeah, and I like it.
Like,
and I'm worried, but I like it.
sure. The question is it disrupting player fun?
Right.
So that's a good thing to talk to the three of them about. Sometimes you got to solve the solution by talking to them out of the game,
Mm-hmm.
or solve the problem rather. Because like that kind of forward momentum could be really useful. But if the other players feel like that player is taking their agency away, then that becomes a problem.
That's good.
So that's a thorny one. That might require more a more surgical.
I'm kind of sitting on it right now because it's working.
Answer, but it's hard to get to, you know.
Yeah, it's working right now. It's just a little spooky because
Sure.
it's because right now it's working, but I can see where there are some players who are not that like this. It's so funny what tabletop will do to people. They like the person, but the character is a little chafing because it's so different from the person as an individual. And that's kind of the scenario they're in. They're like, I trust this person, but this character is a little chafing. And some of them like the character. I personally like it because it's I feel like the player behind the character knows when to create that tension. Because maybe this is a great place. I don't know how to make the players come to a decision necessarily when it comes to like this situation with the hag where they're literally doing a Mexican standoff. And it's like, well, I can either like I can start the fight, but I can see what the players could do, and they're just not doing. Like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
I think
how do you handle that as a DM?
I was having a similar issue with my players a couple weeks ago, but one thing I've done, and you can't do this all the time. One thing I did for our last major dungeon is I added an external pressure, like a time. Not like I didn't time them, but it was a time-sensitive situation. They were in the bowels of a giant coral golem. That was carrying.
Talk to you about that later.
That was carrying one of the insanity weapons to the surface to attack a major city. And it hadn't kind of gone off yet. Once it goes off, anything in the radius goes insane. There's a city on top of the golem. The players decided, probably responsibly, that they needed to rest before they went into kind of the main chamber to shut it down, because it was well guarded. In so doing, they saved the city on the surface, but they lost the underwater city on top of the golem. So that kind of time sensitive, like external pressure, can help force a more executive decision.
So also, do you just like bring that up in a moment and you're like, sorry, go ahead. Also,
sorry, I was about to give another example, but what were you gonna ask?
Like, so in that moment where I have player A, player B, I'm going to say player group A, player group B, because usually what happens, especially in my crew where I've got 7 people, you have 2 groups. And so they start getting into the discussion of like, well, should we go here? Should we go here? Now they have come up with interesting solutions. Like they usually, when it is obvious it's going way too long, they're like, okay, flip the coin. And they literally have a coin that they just flip. And then they go with that decision. Or they split the party. Yay! and then I weep.
I'm actually a little more in favor of splitting the party than I used to be. As long as you can do it, as long as it can be done like a controlled sort of way, and you're remembering to bounce the spotlight and not, dear God, running two combats at the same time.
No, I usually do something like cutscene,
Right.
like, and
Control the
so
camera.
camera pans, and they get that
Yeah.
analogy. So I'm like, all right, before we finish your next action, or before you tell me what you're gonna do, you open the gate, and the scene cuts to.
Yeah, that's a good way to do that.
But how do you do it in the moment? So where they're sitting here, and I've got player group A and player group B, and they're like, well, we should go down this pathway, or we should go save these people, and they're like, pathway people. Do you just kind of like interject and go, keep in mind, guys, you've been arguing for 10 minutes now in game time, and you know that the timer has an out. Like, how do you interject that?
Flavorfully add narrative of pressure. Like you could say, like they're about to go down this way or that way, and they've been taking a while, and then like maybe they hear a scream off in the distance. It's like, oh shit, we maybe lost somebody because we were sitting here dallying.
That's good.
So I guess enforcing consequences in game.
And I'm still learning how to do that well.
More specifically about your players and your person who is like, I'll take charge. I guess what I would do is just monitor the situation for a little while, watch people's faces, see if they're reacting negatively or positively or neutral, and then you decide from there which way to go. Because you can always like talk to the person. It's like, hey, or you can talk to the whole group, whatever. Just depends on what you think is best.
That's good. I just had another thought.
Too many thoughts, guy.
You realize my brain squirrels, but it's gone because the British say squirrel so much better than Americans. Come back, Jake.
I'm back. Sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah. Sorry. What did I miss?
Nothing.
You missed me commenting on my preference of the word squirrel as opposed to squirrel.
Noted. Another thing to resolve decision tension like that is introduce a third party.
Ooh.
Like, especially in a standoff situation like that. Let's say I'm running Starfinder and my characters have cornered an arms dealer. And they're trying to decide what's going on. I might introduce a group of hostile bounty hunters who also want the arms dealer. And then it becomes a like a three-way shootout.
Nice. I was thinking in a shop place there, and then I just realized you meant in combat, which is totally well. Okay.
So it kind of takes it into a, like, you have a very small window to just capture this guy and move on if that's what you want, or you're standing here figuring it out, feeling the situation, then unbeknownst to you, outside third party is like, we're gonna shoot up this place and you because we want him. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that analogy.
It reminds me of the warthog bounty hunter from that episode of Samurai Jack with the Scotsman and the bridge.
Oh my gosh. I love Samurai Jack. That world is so cool.
It is very rich.
It's like the only, outside of like the Thundercats, the only other world that I've seen that it really does what I think is tech magic really well. Like Hex Tech.
Yeah, definitely integrating a lot of that into my interpretation of Starfinder.
I love it.
Let's go back to the splitting the party discussion. Pros and cons. I'll start. I think the pros, you can get more stuff done, more like people get to do what they want, and less like, hey, we're a group, we have to decide to do something, compromise, etc. but you can't follow that forever, or else you just end up running 2 different campaigns, and that's nobody
Yeah.
wants that.
Here's a pro. More opportunities, or maybe it could also be interpreted as a con. More opportunities for players to like keep secrets from each other. And if you're into that kind of drama, that can be a feature and not a bug. So there's greater opportunity for conflict.
Usually happens in dungeons for me, if I'm completely honest. It's more just like there are 2 pathways. We come to a fork in the road. We can't make a decision. You 3 go this way. We'll 4 go this way. And they have 2 familiars. One of them is a modified warlock pet, and the other one is an actual fine familiar. And usually what they'll do is they have a signal for one or the other, and then they just split and go each way. I don't have so much of the secrets issues, which I think is super cool. I like it when that kind of stuff happens. But sometimes it's hard to manage the meta with that and the secrets because they hear each, and I don't take them into separate rooms when it's party split.
For me, I trust my players' ability to separate player knowledge from character knowledge.
And mine do a fairly good job at that. So I'm in desperate need of the restroom, so I'm going to step away for a second. I've had way too much coffee.
I've actually got to scooch.
We've been going for a while.
In the next few minutes, anyway, I've got a family function.
Oh, then are we going to keep going, or are we going to?
I think we can call it here. It's been a few minutes running.
Just a few, which is fun. Okay.
So I think next time we'll pick up where we left off. There's not much left off. There was one thing I wanted to talk about, and that was injecting narrative into random encounters. Something I've started enjoying a lot.
I'm not very good with random encounters, so I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
But
not great with random encounters.
More meta based, I guess.
Okay.
The Twitch VOD will be available for I think a long while, so that'll be there. And then I think in the next few days I'll try to get it on YouTube, and I'll send you guys a link. And I think there's a link to my YouTube below, but I'll figure it all out. Don't worry. So thank you for joining me. Hope to see you guys next week around the same time.
Yep.
We've got the kinks and bugs worked out for the stream, so I think it should go pretty smooth.
Exciting.
If you guys have any ideas for a musical intro, feel free to hit me up.
I will, by all means, dig around in that.
Probably only ska.
Nice. Da, 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 da.
Well, in that case, everybody have a good day. Thank you, some of you chatters, for showing up and stuff. And
I'll start shouting it out more when I'm streaming, and maybe we can combine all of our communities.
That would be lovely. Most of my community is Blood Bowl people, so we'll see how many are interested in D&D.
My community is mostly me and my players.
Yeah, but I think actually next week we might pick up, might try to bring in one of the guests from Someone's campaign.
Nice.
Sounds good.
All right.
And all right. Excellent.
Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Deuces.